I did my first attempt. I did not got picked. They filed my H1B in 18. Did not got picked. They filed my H1B again the next year, which was like my third attempt. H1 did the H1B transfer, got the RFE.
What was the RFE for?
I completely forgot that I have to get a stamping done. My visa is not stamped, and we have like the plans to go to Europe in 3 months. And then I was like, oh shit, we completely missed this, and we had to like scrape the entire plan. There's another story where I tried leasing a car, and I had no idea that like most of these companies, especially like these bigger brands like Jaguar or Porsche or these brands, they would not lease you if you're on H1B, or the APR would be ridiculously high. So that's where I started looking into like how can I get out of this.
You have gotten the EB1A for yourself, and then your wife got it as well. Is that true? What is EB1A, and why is this better than H1B and all of the other visas?
When less people were doing it, obviously there is less competition, and like when more and more people try and doing it, there's more competition. USCIS also have to set certain set of standards. People come up to me and is like, hey, what if I don't get approved? I'm like, dude, how do you know if you don't try?
This video is sponsored by Team Jinee, and you will learn a lot more about them during the podcast. But before you watch the podcast, I have two things to let you know. Number one is, after watching this podcast, you feel like your profile is eligible for EB1A, which is a talent-based visa. Team Jinee actually helps you build the ultimate profile so that you can file your petition. Now, to evaluate profile, people charge about $100 to $200. Even Team Jinee does charge that. But because you're watching this and because you're part of my community, you get to evaluate your profile for absolutely free, and they will waive off that fees if you email them at support@jineegreencard.com. I'll also put it in the description, but you have to mention in the subject line that you came from me, which is YUDI J, in the subject or somewhere in the email, so that way they know and they can waive off that profile evaluation fees. Number two is, if you're someone who would like to learn about all of this through email, I sent out all this valuable information in my weekly email newsletter. I'll also put it in the description. We have now about 32,000 readers who are actually getting all this information before anybody else. So if you want to be part of that community, absolutely free for weekly newsletter. Link is in the description. And now enjoy this conversation to understand how the talent-based visa work. And I hope you enjoy this podcast. All right. Awesome. I'm excited to get this started. Thank you, Sal, for doing this. Let's do quick intro for people who don't know you, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, my name is Sahil. I've been in the States for like over 10 years at this point. Did the whole shebang of like F1 OPT, STEM OPT, H1B, EV2 approval, and then EV1 approval. Also tried EV5, but didn't had enough funds. Um, so got my EV1A approved, and like since then have been helping out. Like I initially started helping out my mom because she runs a staffing firm in terms of like getting other people build up their profile, and from there turned it into like a scalable product and started like Team Jinee for helping everyone out in terms of like getting their EB1 approved. So that's like a very short version of like what I do.
Yeah, and that's what I will explore in this, like, and probably in like hour-long conversation. So,
Yeah,
when did you said 10 hours? That's just the same like me. I also came 10 hours, 10 years ago.
yeah,
Was it 2014?
yeah. I came. Did you came in 2014 as well?
I did.
Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I came in
yeah.
2014. I still
Same.
remember the date, man. I think it was August
5th
9th or
August.
something.
Mine
Yeah,
was 5th
right.
August.
Yeah.
Right. I think everybody does remember when they landed in United States. So,
Right.
what did you come to do in United States?
Yeah, I came here for my master's. Me and a friend of mine, we both did our bachelor's together, and then I was very clear, like I want to go and do my master's because, like, I had one of my cousins who basically did his master's from United States and was working at Google at that time. So I was very focused that I want to get my master's started. So within like my second year of bachelor's, I was started preparing for like GRE and GMATs and whatnot, IELTS, TOEFL, all those examinations, and then eventually came here in 2014. Both of us to did our masters in computer science,
From which university?
a State University of New York at Binghamton.
Oh, Sunny. Okay, Suni
Yeah,
Binghamton. Got it.
Swimmington.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice. And the reason I'm asking is so that because I know we are going to get into talent based visa, which is EB1.
right,
And it's good to have the context of what kind of profile you had, because then people can relate like, okay, you're
right.
not like a Einstein genius type things, even though
Yeah,
the word it says Einstein visa.
yeah.
But,
Yeah, it's cool to put it up on LinkedIn, right? Recipient of EB1A Einstein Visa.
right, exactly. So we'll get to EB1. So you did computer science, then you moved on. I'm assuming you got a job and you worked
Yeah,
for some tech company. Is that correct?
right. Yeah, yeah. I graduated out in 2016, and then I was initially working at Universal. So my career is like, I think this is also like a lot of time people ask me these questions. My career was focused a little bit more around like test automation, and I was not doing software development. So a lot of time
Nice.
people are like, oh, if you have been doing test automation, that's usually like looked down upon sometimes, because like they feel like,
Mm.
okay, if you're not a developer or something, or if you're not doing anything specific, you don't have the talent, which is totally untrue. So yeah, I was doing test automation. I first started working for Universal Instruments.
Timeline wise, this is 2016. Assuming
Correct. Correct.
this is you are on OPT. At what point
Correct.
did you get your H1B selected in the first attempt, or
No.
no?
So yeah, that's also a crazy story. So I I did my first attempt. I did not got picked. The first attempt was in 17. So I did
Mm.
not got picked. I moved out of Universal because Universal was more of like a out of school job, right? Like the pay is not awesome. You
Yeah, the
basically
first
doing this
job,
job.
like, yeah,
Right, right.
right.
Yeah. You're just doing this for the experience and whatnot. So I moved out from there and moved to SAP. So then I started working at SAP.
Same role.
They did my, yeah, test automation, but I was working on their travel and expense management platform and not
Gotcha. Also, so
essentially
move from
the
hardware to
manufacturing.
software.
Correct. Domain completely changed.
Mm.
So yeah, moved there. They filed my H1B in 18, did not got picked. They filed my H1B again the next year, which was like my third attempt. And this is a funny story because I think that was the first year where they did like two lotteries or something happened, or like I did not had my decision and everyone else had their decision. So we
Oh.
used to have like a group of like 10 or 12 friends from Binghamton who graduated out from Binghamton. So few people got it like in 17, few people got in 18, everybody
Mm.
got in 19, and I was the only one out. And I talked to my manager at that time. I was like, hey, what do we do? I don't have any options. I'm gonna like run out of status. So he told me like you have a couple of options. Either you can move to Canada, and thankfully I was at SAP and they had these options because like they're pretty global. So they told me like either you move to Canada, we have a team in Canada, or there was a team in Prague, Czech Republic. We used to closely work with them. So he said like that's
Right.
another option which you can look into, but language might be an issue for you. So I was like, okay. And I was talking to my wife, my girlfriend at the time, is like, dude, what do we do? This is the situation. And she was already pissed at me because like she was in Tamuke, and then she took transfer to like SUNY because of me. She was like, okay, like I'll move down there for you. And then
Yeah.
she came to New York, and then I moved to DC for this job with SAP. So she was
Mm.
like, dude, I'm done chasing you. If you want to go to Canada, you go to Canada. I'm not coming to Canada. And thankfully, like the same day we discussed this situation, like in the morning with my managers, like, okay, you could move and whatnot. The same day, like later in the day, he sent me like a Slack message. I still remember the Slack message. He first sent like a Canada flag in the Slack, and then sent like a big cross, and then it's like, dude, your H1B did get through. I was like, oh shit, that is awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. What you're going to watch is an amazing story. But before you watch that, I just want to quickly say that all of these story, I compile the key insights from these stories and all the podcasts that I do. And I put this in my free exclusive newsletter community. Every week, more than 16,000 people receive my newsletter and they love it. And here are some of the examples you can see. This was a podcast on George Mason universities, and you can see how to network and 10% cold emailing, powerful LinkedIn techniques, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in becoming part of this exclusive newsletter community, absolutely free. Link is in the description, or you can go to udj.com/newsletter. So first attempt, like, people are like, okay, no
Right.
problem, I still have two
Hmm.
more attempts, ho jayega, right? And then
Hmm.
the second attempt, now you are like, okay, did you start thinking about the backup, or you were like, थर्ड में तो हो ही जाएगा.
No, no, I was thinking about the backup, bro. Because like I'm not the luckiest people. Like I feel like if I go into a lottery, I would never win. So I was
Hmm.
already like trying to plan out what would I do. So I think I was having this discussion, but the major problem in my case was if it was just me, it would have been still like okay, I would have like just
Hmm.
leave things and move somewhere else. I wasn't really like hesitant in terms of like I want to live in the United States or like I don't want to go anywhere else. But then you have like so many obligations and like especially like when you have someone with you, they also have their own life, so it's not as easy to like just leave
Yeah.
everything and like just
Yeah.
move out.
Yeah.
That
You
was
have
the
that
biggest challenge.
dependency. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So from that perspective, like in my mind, I was like, worst case to worst, if I have to move, we'll see something. Maybe I move for 1 year and then try and come back in on like L1 or something, or like decide
Huh,
because
and
like I
then
didn't
keep
wanted
trying
to.
H1B because
Right,
you can
right,
still keep trying H1B. Yeah.
correct. Yeah, because I didn't
Hmm.
wanted to uproot her life again. It's like okay, you also make the decision and
Hmm.
sacrifice again and move with me.
Hmm. I'm sure like the third year when you until you found out that you got picked, but before that you probably it was
Yeah.
very much like a stress and panic that okay.
It was crazy, and it happened twice. So my wife, she was like a year behind from me in terms of her lottery. So she also didn't got picked in like her first two H1B lotteries, and then 2020, the year I got picked the next year, she was in the very same situation. She was like, "Dude, if this does not come through, what do we do?" And we were not married at the time, so she did not have
Hmm.
the option of H4 or anything. So we were again
Hmm.
in like the same exact boat. It's like okay. Then she was like, "Now I'll move to Canada." You have to make the sacrifice.
Oh, no. Right. So 2019, you got picked. Then 2020 was her third attempt,
Right, right.
and in this case,
But she also
you
got picked into yeah.
she also got picked. Okay.
Yeah, both
So
in third attempt.
got it. Okay. So this is you're still with SAP Test Automation 2019 H1B picked. Now, at what point? So you mentioned EB2, which is did you go for national interest?
No, I was under EB2 I-140 approval.
Acha,
And wife
normal
was
perm
under
process.
correct. And wife was under EB2 NIW.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
And maybe we should do separate podcast with your wife, like in her journey as well. I'll
yeah,
be
yeah.
interested if she's interested. But okay, in your case, normal perm process, I-140 approved. How long did that take from 2019 to?
So I messed it up once because, like, I mean, when they started the process, it's ridiculously long, first and foremost, 2 years. So if you
And at
don't
that
take your
time,
job,
Trump was in the
right,
thing.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had like 15 calls on that yesterday. Anyways, asking about like how Trump's gonna change things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think so. First time I kind of like left it when SAP started it first because I moved out of SAP. So I did not because it used to take almost 2 years, and like I was not enjoying my role at SAP. Like in all honesty, like I've, I'm not sure, but I have friends at Microsoft who say the same thing. But it feels like it's a retirement job, honestly.
Ha ha.
Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. It is. It
yeah,
is. That's
yeah,
what I've heard from a lot of Microsoft people that it's very
yeah,
chill life and
yeah,
it's not like super stressful. Work life balance is full on.
yeah.
Events karo, attend all these
Huh.
things and yeah.
Yeah, so same thing with SAP. Like I learned a lot because like a couple of
Mm,
teams were like really awesome. Like I think the team in Prague was like super awesome. Probably
mm,
like the best engineers I've worked with so far in terms of
mm,
like test automation. But then that job became like so stagnant. Like nobody cared if I don't do anything for like 6 months. So it's like okay, I need to move out of here if I need to like do something else, whatnot. So that's where I like decided to leave the first process and move out of there after like my H1B approval. And then I moved to Kata. And
acha,
that's where like
yeah.
I did the I-140. Yeah, that's where I went into like the entire fintech space.
So,
Because I
but
used to.
for moving there
Mhm.
also, you had to probably go through the H1B transfer process.
H1 did the H1B transfer, got the RFE on the
Oh
transfer.
no, what was the
Yeah.
RFE for?
I do not remember, man. I don't think it was something crazy, but I remember we were in Puerto Rico vacationing before I basically moved
Oh no.
from, yeah, SAP to like Kata, and I got an RFE. I was like, oh shit. But I rolled the dice. I did not waited for the RFE to get cleared. I did join them, and it was
Hmm,
cleared after like a month, couple of months, something like that. Uh,
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay.
don't remember the what it was for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's all good. And then Carta also, again, profile wise, you're still test automation, senior role
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. I was the founding test automation engineer
Okay.
at Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Got it. And they were willing to do green, like perm process. They
Right.
did that labor certification, all of that.
Yeah.
I-140 is approved. So at what? So this is 2021.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Uh,
2021
at
was approved.
at what point did you decide like, okay, now I should, like, how did the EB1A even come
Yeah.
into? And for people who don't know what is EB1A, I know this is
Yeah.
talked a lot about, but if you can just explain very briefly, like, what is EB1A and how did you come across that option?
Yeah, so I think like when my reason was not like I wasn't specifically looking into like these specific visas. My goal was like how do I do things on my own and like get out of like this entire H1B thing,
Hmm.
because like there were a few different aspects. One, I always wanted to like do my own stuff, start my own businesses and whatnot, because I had like three businesses in India by that time.
Hmm.
I We built out like a platform called Trade on the House, which was basically automated algorithm trading. That's why I also moved to Kata, because like in my personal life I was always interested in finance and fitness. Those are like my two things. So I was like, I need to do something in finance. Even when I was doing my bachelor's, we used to day trade all the time. We used to do like forex trading and whatnot. So we built that platform out because we couldn't register it in United States. We registered it in India, and then we're like trying to do it that way. My mother used to have a staffing firm here, so I was like always like passively involved with it, like in one way or another, but never able to like fully work on it. So that was one aspect that I want to like be able to focus on some of my stuff. Second, of course, was like the visa stamping and whatnot, which is like super annoying. Right? This is like a funny story. One time, what happened was, I think this is, I don't remember, like 2020 or something like that. But basically, we planned up our vacation for next year. Me and my wife, we got super excited because we were finding like some cheap tickets for Europe. It's like, oh, this is awesome. Let's book the ticket, and we booked the hotel, and we got it all sorted for next summer. Now, in February or March, she's like, something happened. We're like, okay, let's look at the passport. And we completely forgot. I completely forgot that I have to get a stamping done. My visa is not stamped.
Oh,
And we have like the plans to go to Europe in 3 months. And then I was like, oh shit, we completely missed this. And we had to like scrape the entire plan. So things like that would like piss me off. There's another story where I tried leasing a car, and I had
hmm.
no idea that like most of these companies, especially like, these bigger brands like Jaguar or Porsche or these brands, they would not lease you if you're on H1B, or the APR would be ridiculously high, like 10% or
Interesting.
something and whatnot.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a very funny story, dude. We used to have a Volvo. I'm segmenting, but I'll quickly walk you through this. So this is super funny because we used to have a Volvo,
Hmm.
and we decided that because I love cars, like I always tell her that if we ever go bankrupt, it would be because we bought too many cars.
How many,
So
how many cars do you have right now?
I have three right now. I'm not going bonkers, but we are both remote, so three is enough just for like the two of
Huh.
us.
I'm sure
So
they are
we,
all luxury cars though.
not really, but yeah, I have a GT3 RS. So
Not
that one is
really, but
awesome.
GD3 RS.
Oh, that's the only one. Other is the Tesla, the every Indian household staple car.
Uh,
Um, but yeah.
nice.
Um,
Hmm.
So we had a Volvo. We sold the Volvo, and then we were thinking about like, okay, we'll lease a Jaguar F Pace. Everything was sorted. They were giving us like a 0.99% APR, which is awesome. And then we never talked about my visa status or whatnot. And then we sold the car. We took an Uber, went to Jaguar, and they're like, oh,
Oh,
we didn't know like you're an H1B, and they said like your APR is going to be 8% or something. And we were like, of course, like it's not gonna fit in our budget. Right
yeah.
across was a Porsche showroom. We went to the Porsche, did the whole shebang. We thought, okay, we'll lease Makan. And then there was this Pakistani guy who we were like dealing with. He was like, oh, I'll sort it out and whatnot. And Porsche has their own financial sector,
Hmm.
like their own
Hmm.
finance aspect. And they came out and said the same thing, that, okay, we cannot lease you on H1B. Also, because my H1B, I think, was expiring and the lease period was over that. So
Hmm.
that was another aspect. We came back home, didn't had a car for a week. We are in Reston, Virginia at that time, taking trains and whatnot. And then eventually I leased out an Alfa Romeo because they used to work with Ally Financing, and Ally basically does allow leasing to
Uh,
folks on H1B1.
mm,
So yeah,
mm,
stuff like that. It's just like various different aspects which kind of like, are really small, but like when they gradually builds up, you kind of like start feeling annoying. So that's where I started looking into like, how can I get out of this? Because this EB2 I-140 approval and whatnot's not gonna work out. And you have two types of people. I feel like one is people like me who constantly keep looking for like better options and like whatnot.
mm,
What can we do about it? What can I change? And then I have ton of friends who are like, oh, something would change. There's some law will come up and the backlog would clear, or like the country cap would go away. They're still talking
mm,
the same thing. It's been over five
mm.
years. So that's where I started looking into EB5 first, because I had no idea what EB1 is. It was not really popular like back in like
Yeah.
2020 and whatnot, right? So I did that, and then eventually I figured out that I went to an attorney who basically is like very popular EB5 attorney, and she told me like we have to verify every source of income. Because what I was thinking in my mind was I would pool money from like some of my father's friends or like relatives and whatnot,
Mm.
right? Take the money on
And for
five
people
percent.
who, sorry, for people who don't know what is EB5, it's an investor visa where you need 800,000 or
Right.
1.5 million or something like
Correct.
that, and
Yeah.
show that you're gonna create jobs for Americans, etc. Something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there are like various different projects that you have to be part of. It's not like somebody was asking me a few days ago, can I open up a gas station? That's not how it
Ha.
works. There's like a specific project that you have to be involved in.
Gas
And the
station,
return
grocery
is not.
store, motels.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That does not work. So basically, and so yeah, I did that and I asked her, and so, because the way I was thinking about it was like, I'll pool money from these people, even if it's like a 6% interest rate, and I park this back in here and it's like a 5% interest rate. I am fine paying like 1 or 2% differentiate in the interest rate if I'm able to like sort. That's how my mind was working at that time.
Ha, ha, ha.
And then the attorney said like each source of income has to be verified, and basically if you're pooling money from like four different accounts, let's say, because I don't have $800,000 sitting in my account, so if you're going through like four or five accounts, the
I
source of
mean, if you sell your
verification.
3, 4 cars, you will get 800,000.
No, I didn't have the cars at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically, she said like to verify every source of income, there's like $15,000 that attorney charge. So just in attorney
Mm.
fees, if you have money coming in from like four or five accounts, you're paying like $60,000, $75,000 for the income verification. It's like, okay, this is not gonna work out. Like I'm scraping pennies here, trying to like
Yeah.
get through
Yeah.
this. So then I started looking into like what are some of the other options, and then I came across EB1A. No idea about how AB1A works. Like everyone else initially like got scared, and like at that time it wasn't even like too popular.
Mm.
So then started looking into it. Found there was one Chinese girl who got approved, and she had a PDF, like a quick PDF walkthrough of like how some of these things works. So basically, read that out first. Spend a lot of time in terms of like researching how criteria works. I had no idea about like what's the story, what are final merits, or what are trends, and all that sort of stuff. All is like just like any regular guy is like, because everyone who comes to me asks me first thing, oh, I don't have citations or I don't have patents. It's like 90% of the people who file for EB1 don't have those. So
Yeah.
um,
Can
that's how
we
I started into it.
explain what is EB1A?
Yeah, so like in the shortest and like the most dumbed down version of EB1A is going to be, it's a visa for like extraordinary individual in their particular domain. Usually you want to be in like the top 10% of the people. That's like a very dumbed down version of like what EB1A visa is. It's like technically a US employment based green card for individuals with extraordinary abilities in art, science, business, education, athletics. First preference visa category, does not require a labor certification or a job offer. Quick clarification here. Technically, a job offer is not required, but critical role is one of the criterias, which is something that you have to prove if you want to argue that criteria by either having a good job or by having like some sort of a business and whatnot. So it's not required to file the petition, but it's good to have one. It's ideal for individuals who can demonstrate like sustained national or international acclaim and want to live and work permanently in the United States. Technically, top 10% in your field. What your field slash niche becomes an interesting topic that we can like later talk on. But essentially, your field is not like, hey, I am like an amazing software developer, or I'm an amazing test automation engineer, and I'm an amazing XYZ. That's not what your field is. Your field is something which has to be like really specific in terms of like your technical skills, the projects that you have been part of, the domain that you are in, and tying this all together into a national story narrative that you kind of like put together, versus saying I'm an amazing software developer, because then it becomes almost impossible to prove yourself in the
Mm,
top 10% because everyone is amazing software developer. So
mm,
that's like a little bit around EB1A.
mm, mm. And why
Um,
why is this better than H1B and all of the other visas?
so H1Bs and all those becomes non-immigrant visas. So none of those are basically like going to give you a green
Huh.
card. So
And
right now,
sorry,
Mhm.
I just
No,
wanted to
no,
clarify. EB1A, we call it visa, but it's technically green card, permanent resident.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. It's an immigrant pathway. It's the immigrant pathway too. So basically, um, you have what, like your employers can do EB2s and EB3s. So
Mm.
specifically, if you are born in India, EB2 and EB3s is like a ridiculous queue. Even
Yeah.
EB2 and IW, because sometimes people think like EB2 and IW is going to be a faster pace. It's not really. You basically skip the whole shebang of 2 years. You don't have to do
Yeah.
the labor certification and whatnot. You can do the self petition. So all those are good aspects for it. But if the goal is to ultimately get a green card, it's still not going to be the best route. EB2 and IW is something which I recommend to people. Let's say like you are on H1, your wife is on H4, but you do not have an I-140 approved, and you want a quick solution to get an I-140 approved so she can file for H4 EAD, then EB2 NAW could be a better option because it's
Mhm.
easier to prepare. Like on a scale of 0 to 10, it's probably like a 2 or 3, versus an EB1 is like an 8 or 9. So you can like prepare quickly and like get the EAD quicker for your partner. Or if you are like, let's say you get 6 years on H1B, you're about to run out, you do not have an I-140 approved, then EB2 NIW is a quick option to like quickly try and get the I-140. That's where like EB2 NIW has its merits. EB2, EB3, I don't think has any merits other than getting the I-140 through your employers and being able to
Yeah,
extend
just
your
the
H1B.
priority date and yeah. Yeah.
Correct. And then EB1A and EB5 are the only two viable options, which I feel like can give you a green card in this lifetime, if you're born in India. And then
Yeah.
EB5 is not really viable, like until unless you make a lot of money. So the
Mm.
only option that you're left with is EB1A. But of course, that comes with like a lot of preparation and like building up your profile to a point where it will get approved, especially in today's day and age. Because when less people were doing it, obviously there is less competition, and like when more and more people try and doing it, there's more competition. USCIS also have to set certain set of standards in order to like adjust the petition, because I also feel like USCIS has also evolved in this space, because in the past they were also trying to figure out like how exactly EB1A ties into technical field, because most of the times,
Mm.
like as far as I remember, like 5-10 years ago, I don't know anyone who was doing EB1A. Most of
Yeah.
these guys maybe were like actors or like people from like the fields of arts, and not really from the field of science.
Engineering. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what I've seen is like they've also been evolving as the category is evolving.
Mm. So, in your case, you came across this, you started studying how this works, and you're like, okay,
Correct.
this is something. It probably felt very daunting at the point because you're like, I don't have, there's about 10 criteria, and we're going to go through that. But
Right.
out of this, I don't know if I'm going to fit in this. I don't feel I'm in the top 10%. So, there's
Right.
probably a lot of self doubt, but
Yeah.
somehow you figured out the process.
Right.
And I'm gonna fast forward it. We will come back to this,
Yeah.
but you have gotten the EB1A for yourself, and then your wife got it as well. Is
Yeah.
that true? Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they don't technically get, but it's when you like file for 485, you include your kids under 21 and your wife with it.
Okay. So, oh, I see. And then, but you did get EB1A, right?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now after that you've gotten, you're like, okay, I should help others, and then you started helping few of your friends and family,
Right.
and then you just like shit like this. More people should be aware of this, and then that's
Right.
how the birth of Team Genie happened. Is that true, or like was there any
Yeah.
different story?
Yeah, I think a little bit of caveat to it is I think like once I started prepping on it, first and foremost, like I think I wasted a lot of time because like I had no idea, right? I'm trying to Google and like DIY, like 2.5 years just trying to figure out like how this entire shebang works, made a lot of mistakes. put in a wasted a lot of money, honestly, because like I did not know what works and what does not works. So every opportunity that I'm seeing, I'm going after it, and all of them is like, oh, there's like this certain conference going on, pay $200. This XYZ going on, pay another $300. So I'm going
Mm.
and doing all of this. Where like probably 90% of those were like worthless. So could have saved like a lot of money. So that was one aspect. Second thing, like the way once I got it, the way it turned into a product eventually was because like I used to, I think I talked about my mom's staffing firms, right? So she used to have a lot of contractors. So they would basically struggle with like a lot of their job aspects because like it's difficult as a contractor to like get the job sorted, especially like because of their visa and whatnot. So I
Mm.
started helping them out in terms of like
Mm.
building their profile. Like, guys, do this, do this, do this, and then you can file for it. And then I was constantly repeating myself. Like for the same guy, I'm like on call for like hours for like the same exact stuff, like what I need, right? Because like let's say for the first to get the initial setup done, I need a lot of information of like their background, their projects, any tools that they've worked on, any impactful work that they've done that at their job and whatnot. This is some information which I need from everyone. So that was the first aspect where I tried organizing it. Like, okay, let me put this together like in an Excel sheet and like ask them to like complete this so that I have the information. So it becomes easier for me to help them out. So that's how it came along, and that's where I thought like, okay, this is something which I can like now turn into like a scalable product and like try and help as many people as I can. So
Mm.
that was like the story behind it.
Got it. Okay. And then before we move on to how like you went through the profile building and the criteria and all of it, how does Team Genie like help people? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so there are four different aspects that I try and focus on. First and foremost, like I always like to clarify this, that this is not, we don't do it for them. This is not a do it for you program. We handhold them through everything, like make it super easy, make it super quick, so that they can get it done in fastest period of time and focus on the things that actually matter and not focus on like any random stuff. So the way we kind of work right now is like once anyone comes on boarded, my first aspect is to like create their story. Like what do we want to tell, like what's your story, what's your impact. Like a lot of people come to me like, hey guy, I'm a quality engineer, or I am XYZ, I haven't done anything, how
Yeah,
does
I'm a
it
product
relate and
manager.
whatnot. Yeah,
Yeah.
product manager, whatnot. So like I never talked in my petition about test automation. I was always talking about the impact of my work in the petition. So like the first aspect is to get a lot of information from them. So people sometimes feel overwhelmed in like first 2 or 3 weeks because I ask a lot of questions. But that's the only way for me to kind of like, curate their story and not keep it generalized, to make it very
Mm.
specific. So that's the one
Mm.
aspect, to focus on story. Then the second aspect is going into the criterias. um, Various different criteria has various different aspects. For example, let's say for authorship, we look into their own existing, because I also understand that these guys are not from research background. I am not from research background. I was not never from a research background. um, Luckily I had 3 papers which I did back in bachelor's, but those was like not the highest quality papers, but something which you do as a student, right? So like the second aspect is to like figure out each specific criterias. What are we going to shoot for in this particular case? Where is this guy strong? Uh-huh.
I know we talked about criterias a lot. Why do we talk about criterias? I know the
Right.
answer, but I want you to
Yeah.
tell the audience like what do we mean by criteria?
Right. So basically, what happens is at the very surface level, you're trying to prove that you are exceptional in your field. Criterias are just a way of proving that, right? How do
Hmm.
you quantify and say that I am awesome in this particular field? Like, let's say there is like a YouTube marathon, and this like, okay, UD is saying I'm in like the top 10% of like in the
YouTube
immigrant space,
space.
right?
Yeah.
YouTube
Hmm.
space. Now, how do you prove that? There needs to be certain criteria, like how many, maybe let's say, followers you have, or like how many videos you put out, and like what's the engagement rate, right? So that's exactly what criterias are. Understand the
Hmm.
basics first, rather than going into like what is specific criteria is. So that's just
Hmm.
simply a way of proving what you're telling them. Like, hey, I am
Hmm.
awesome Android developer, and the Android that I develop is for Google, and all the major companies in the world are like using it. So my work is like really impactful for Google, and Google is really impactful for everyone else in the world. Okay, prove it. So that's where criteria comes in.
Hmm.
So in total you have 10 criteria.
Hmm.
Basically, you have authorship, number one. You have original contribution, you have critical role, you have high remuneration, you have membership, judging, press, awards, artistic exhibition, and commercial success in performing arts. So most of the times, because of the audience that we are talking to, artistic exhibitions and commercial success is something which does not apply to majority of the people who are like in the field of sciences. They're more for the people in the field of the arts. So we are left with 8 criteria. USCIS wants you to prove that you qualify for at least 3 criteria out of these
Mm.
8 criteria that we have. So that's the goal. But we never go for like minimum 3 criteria because you don't want your petition to look like a bare minimum petition where it has like 3 criteria only and nothing else going on. Um, Another important aspect which is not very clear on USCIS websites and a lot of people miss it, just having 3 criteria is not enough. There is, I mean, that's like a level one judgment, but then there is also like a level two subjective judgment where an officer might still reject your petition saying that we don't think like there is enough, or that's like more
Mm.
subjective on the officer. So the goal is to probably not have three but like 5 or 6 solid criteria when we build
Yeah,
out
you
your
need
profile.
three, but we
Correct.
recommend, I mean, you recommend
Yes.
having four, five,
Correct.
six, maybe. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So we usually try for all eight. Initially, the plan is to like try for all eight, but then you also have to be a little bit strategic in terms of like you don't want to put in an argument which dilutes other argument. So, for
Mm.
example, sometimes what I've seen people doing is like, let's say you have 3 or 4 solid criteria going on for you. You have critical role. You're able to prove high remuneration. You have authorship. You have judging. Let's say you have like these 4 or 5 criteria going on for you. Then you have one random membership that you have somewhere, and just because you want to like argue more criteria, you'll put that in as well. Now as an
Mm.
officer, when I'm looking at that petition, I go through like first 3 and 4 criteria. Maybe I like three, the fourth one I feel like okay, this is okay, and then the fifth one I take a look at a membership which is like it gives me like
Mm.
okay, this is this guy like trying to make a fool out of us, or just because like
Mm.
you put in one bad seed in there, it might spoil the entire petition. So you also have to be careful of how much to fight. Volume is not always the right answer. Sometimes people feel like more criteria we fight the better it is, but that's not true. It basically depends on like fighting good criterias. And for some criterias, if you're not really sure if this is good enough or not, then there is always a final merit aspect where we put those as things in the final merits and don't particularly argue one particular criteria. So that's how like the criteria aspect work. So before going deeper into like the criteria itself, couple more things that I'll talk about. So you have the story that you need to build out first, then you have to focus on criterias. Then there are two more things: final merits and trends. So most of the people who do it DIY fails here, and that's why their petition gets rejected. There are like tons of like petitions and examples that I can share with you that comes to me like every day, and I talk to them. They said like we fail because of XYZ reason, and I can quickly figure out like because they're not up to the mark. So final merits is something which is like how do you make sure that your profile is distinguished? Like what's unique about UD or what's unique
Mm.
about Sahil?
Mm.
It's and there are multiple different aspects to it. One, it you could have like unique certifications. Maybe you are volunteering at non-profits, maybe you teach kids, or maybe you teach marginalized community. Anything that kind of like is like distinguishable to you. Maybe you are part of like any specific organization related to your own field and they are doing work in order to like improve the overall aspect. For example, I have a guy who's working in like water work waste management, so he's part of like the American Water Works, and they're constantly building up like how to improve the quality of the water that gets supplied throughout the United States. Now it's not part of any criteria, but this is something which is unique to his profile. So all of that aspects goes into final merits, and it can make or break your case. Like it is super
Mm.
important. Like the most common noise basically means a direct rejection that I have seen for EB1A is when an officer won't even talk about the criteria and would just say, we don't think you meet the final merits for the case. These
Mm.
ones are the hardest one to decode. So final merits can make or break your case, and majority of the people just forget everything and runs after criteria, and that is why their petition gets rejected. So that's another
Mm.
important aspect. Don't ignore that, because if you think about it, what's EB1A? At the end of the day, it's the law saying that okay, we want to give you a green card and you be and live in this country. And the basic rule for that is like you be a good Samaritan. Like if you're good, if you can contribute back to the economy. That's like
Yeah,
that the
you
very
are
basic
helping
level.
country.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's like the third aspect which people ignore, and then the fourth aspect which people miss out on is the trends. So coming back to like what I was talking about, USCIS judging these petitions. So I feel like every month there is something new which comes out of USCIS now on like how they're judging EB1A petition. For example, a lot of
And
people like
I'm sure that changes based on the precedents as well, like
correct.
who's the running that administration as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess like who's running the administration, and also as they start to figuring out some of the loopholes which people are exploiting in the EB1A situation.
Mm.
So a couple of examples would be is like, let's say everyone had a group of like friends who could refer them for like IEEE memberships. So like all the petitions have senior IEEE memberships now. So
Hmm.
they recently what I've seen is like they're not accepting that as part of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a
I've
membership
seen some
criteria.
people running the business of writing research papers.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, yeah, that which is ridiculous. It's like because people don't realize it. Like you might get questioned about it in your 485 interview, and they might ask you like,
mm.
okay, what research did you do, and where exactly? And like some of these guys don't even know the name of the journals where their paper is published. So that is bonkers to me. so, so yeah, stuff like that, which USCIS have like kind of like now starting to flag like certain awards or certain like media houses and whatnot, which they don't like.
Like Times of
Um,
India, Economics Times.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Tons of that. Also, they're trying to provide more clarity every month. Like recently, there are also like good
Yeah,
aspects
yeah,
to it.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that.
like a couple of times, like they in the past there was big confusion. Where like, okay, can if you won an award as part of like your team within your work, does that count? So they
Mm.
recently came out and clarified that now that okay, you guys can present that, even though it's not a very strong argument, but it's something that you can now present as part of your petition. So I feel like it's super important to kind of like be in sync of like how a petition is being judged right now. And
Mm.
unfortunately, there is no one way of identifying that. Like there is no rule or
Yeah, you
there's
just have
like
to be in the trenches of it.
correct, 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 correct,
Yeah.
correct. You have to be in the trenches of it. Like I've become a USCIS geek at this point, and probably like all the attorneys that I know and talk to, they're geeks too. Like they'll go on for 2 hours just talking about like what's working now and what's not working now. So that's the fourth aspect of like you want to basically make sure that your petition is fresh and is basically according to like how the latest trends are working and analyze and like file accordingly. So those are like the four
Mm.
different aspects that we kind of like focus on when we help out directly in preparing a
Yeah.
petition.
I mean, I think the fifth one is I know you didn't mention it, but we spoke about this, and this is also important. Having all the context, like I wouldn't know like where to go, which
Right.
attorney to go to, and
Correct.
so you, since you have worked been helping people for last 4 5
Yeah.
years, you have made all this contacts with PR teams and all of them, so
Correct.
you know who to
Right.
help connect the dots as well.
Yeah. 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 Vendor procurement is like super important. That's why like we have also kept it very transparent. Like we don't charge for like vendor fees or anything ourselves. Because like I'll tell you very honestly, some you'll see online these PR agencies or like other stuff will see like, hey, $5,000 for like 5 PRs, and on the back end it costs like $500. Honestly, similarly for these
Mm.
journals, like some of them have like $25 cost for publishing a paper, and like you're paying like $300 for that. So
Yeah.
the way I wanted to run this program was like to clearly tell them like this is my fee, and these are the vendors. It's $25. You go and pay, so that they
Mm.
know that what they are paying is what they're actually charging, and there is no like this up like a
Yeah, yeah.
upsell
They
of
are not
stuff.
getting scammed. Yeah, yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so again, I'll put the link in the description for people to check out the program. And I know since you're kind enough to help me and my audience as well. So what are we doing special for my audience?
Yeah, so yeah, like if folks are genuinely interested like in joining the program and like seeing if their profile would fit and has the chances of getting approved, then usually like we charge for our profile evaluation, but for your clients, if they could just send us an email with like your reference that hey, you were sent over by UD, then we'll waive off their profile evaluation, and do a free profile evaluation for them, and then let them know like if they qualify to join the program, and whatnot.
Yeah. And then they get special call with you as well. No, just kidding.
Correct. No, no, they do. I actually like you won't believe like so far almost like 99% of the people I do get on a call directly. That's like also one of my thing is like try and make sure like I mentor them directly. There are other people in the program who help out with like certain different aspects. Like you have
Mm.
an editor, a writer, we have paralegals, we have a professor, we have a project manager, we have a journalist. So it's like they have like various different jobs. But like my goal is to make sure that if they're joining the program by seeing my face, I am mentoring them and not basically dissect them
Yeah.
to like someone else.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm
Yeah.
just saying like you will give special care for my audience. No.
Oh, for sure, man. Always.
Nice. Okay. Cool. So going back to your story, so this is it took you about year and a half of research to figure out how this works. How long does the process take? Like when you so tell me the overall timeline. Like from when did you started? How long did it take for the research part, profile building part, the application, and the final result?
Yeah, so for me it was very long because I had no idea. I was like I joined a couple of random programs. I bought
Hmm.
PDFs online, so I almost spent like 2.5 years in order to like sort this out. I think if I would have like the right information, I probably would have been done in like a year maximum, probably even less. Um,
So
so
again, sorry to cut you off. Like, so 2.5 years for you to research because you did it all DIY.
correct,
DIY. But
correct,
let's say people who join your program
right,
now they can skip that whole process
correct,
since they have someone who's done the
yeah.
research. They'll help understand their story, profile, etc. So that time will be reduced, and we'll get to that timeline as well. But for you, 2.5 years for research, then the
Yeah.
process, the application, and all of
Yeah.
that.
After that, it's pretty quick. Basically, like I think the majority of the time goes into profile building. After that,
Hmm.
it's just a couple of months in order to like put the petition together. If you file it under premium, you get the decision back within like 2 weeks. I got it in 4 days. So, like okay. So yeah, once you get that, then if like your date is current, you kind of like file for your 485, which roughly takes like 2-3 months, and then you get like your 765, 131, the parole and the EAD and whatnot. Important point to keep in mind is if for folks that do have a priority date in any of the other criterias categories, sorry, in EB2 or EB3, they can pour that date into EB1A.
Mm.
So that's something to keep in mind to quickly get it done. So like the majority, I always like joke with my attorney friends, like you guys have the best job because like they are only taking like the win-win cases right now. It's like okay,
Yeah.
if they're not
Yeah.
qualified, they'll send it to us. We work on the profile for like a year or what, give it back to them, like, okay, cool, we file.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. So 2.5 years and then year and a half to get the approval.
even less, brother. It's like 2 months to file, 2 weeks to get approved. So approximately 3 months
Acha,
there.
2 weeks to
Uh,
approve.
yeah, I got approved in 4 days. Like I got my I-140 in 4 days after I filed.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
Acha.
basically 2 months to put the petition together, like a legal petition, draft it properly, submit it to USCIS. Then if you file in premium, then premium processing they have to give you back in 15 days, right? So I got it back in like 4 or 5 days. So like within 2.5 months, you have your I-140 approved, and then you basically file for 485, which you have to like take an appointment and whatnot. Roughly that process takes 2 to 4 months
Hmm.
approximately, depending on like the priority date and whatnot. And then you file for 485, you basically get like the 765 and 131, like your EAD and advance parole and the work authorization, travel parole. So that stuff. So that part is pretty quick. Like the petition filing to like getting a green card. If you have a older priority date, you port it. That probably can be done in 6 months. Right now there is 2 years of backlog for 485 basically. So let's say if you do not have a priority date from any of the other categories, then what you do is like you get your I-140 approved. Right now you would have to wait for a couple of years in EB1A for your date to like kind of like become current, and then you file for 485, and then in a couple of months you're able to get things sorted.
And while you are waiting, you can continue your H1B.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, while you're waiting you need to have some sort of non-immigrant status, whether it's H1 or O1 or whatever, STEM OPT, whatever it would be.
Hmm. Maybe we should do like a separate video on O1 as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. So, and then what happens in the interview? You said you had to do the
It's
interview.
It's basic. It's not crazy at all. Honestly, I feel like interviews is
And
they
do you have
wanna
to go outside, or is it in United States?
if you're outside, it depends. The same thing like consular processing or like change of status, one of those things. But I'm not sure if I can share all the details about it, but essentially what I can tell you is like they want to give you, it's more of a formality. One thing that I usually recommend people is because this is a common question that I sometimes get is like, you've gotten the I-140 approved, then the question that I get, like, can I change my job now, or can I go do something else? Because like, so I always advise, it's like, try and keep it at least 50% related. Because you're trying to, because what you're saying is like, I'm going to play cricket and my field of endeavor is cricket. So they say, okay, cool, you're a great cricket player, continue playing cricket in the United States, and then we approve you. But then now you have like a little bit of a time before you go and do the 485, and then you started playing basketball.
Hmm.
So there might be a question is like, why are you playing basketball now? We approved you for playing cricket, which
Hmm.
again, like by law, which usually what I've seen and like what I've heard from other people's experience as well is they are not very strict on that in 485. They do want to give you approve, they do want to give you the green card, they know you have been through enough. Same with me, it was very easy. We just chatted about random stuff for 15 minutes and nothing about EB1A. But I would say like if you try and keep it like at least 50% related just to be on the safe side, that would be ideal.
Hmm. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But and you mentioned consular process or change of status. Regardless, you still have to do the interview, right?
As far as I know, yes. Sometimes they do waive off interviews, and I've heard them waiving off interviews sometimes, but not with any of
Yeah,
my
because
clients or
even
everyone.
I went through family based green card, but I still
Hmm.
had to do the interview, obviously,
Right.
for
Yeah.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Consular processing happens when, like, let's say you got the approval, but then you leave the country, you go back to
Hmm.
India, and you're doing something else, and then your date becomes current.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
that comes in.
What kind of investment people will have to make in terms of like getting this done?
Yeah. Yes. That's like I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to talk through a little bit. I think like it's really dependent also like on your starting profile, because like let's say you have to, I'll give you two quick examples, right? One is let's say we were recently working with like the director of data engineering at Walmart. So he's a guy who's like awesome, like he's making $500,000 a year. He's already have like a couple of criteria sorted, like two or three. He's working with me because he wants to make sure everything is sorted and it does get approved, and like whatever is missing we put in together. So for him, he does not need to spend too much money into like press or XYZ and whatnot. So his
Hmm.
cost comes down a little bit versus someone who's like graduated like a year ago and now has to do a lot of that stuff. So his cost might be a little bit higher, even though I think you probably including like if you join like any profile building program, like if you join our program and if you basically your attorney cost and then the USCIS cost in terms of like filing fee, maybe you also want to do premium. I think over like couple of years, you probably should park 20K to be
Hmm.
on the safe side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what
Yeah,
I've heard as well.
yeah,
One of my friend, she's going through this process. She told me 15 to 20K is like
yeah,
rough figure with everything that you
yeah,
need to do.
yeah. It could
Yeah,
be more depending on like your starting point, but I feel like in terms of like getting a green card, it's a bargain in my opinion, because like again quickly dissecting, we've been looking into like these Portugal golden visas. I think I told you a little bit about it. Like
yeah.
we're looking into like getting a Portugal golden visa and then started looking into Greece golden visa because Portugal was really slow. Like the minimum investment for even those countries is like 250,000. Portugal has lifted that off. Now there's like $500,000, which is what you minimum required. Even in US, like the EB5 is 800. Greece is also lifting it up to like 400,000. So I feel like
Mhm.
probably the cheapest way of getting a green card at this point through
Yeah,
EB1.
yeah, yeah. Nice, amazing, cool. I will again leave all the details for people to reach out to you and make sure to mention me so that way they get the free
Yeah,
profile evaluation. Not free, but you are making it free for them.
yeah.
That's amazing, cool. Any final words of wisdom, thoughts before we wrap?
I think like one point which I kind of touched on a little bit initially was like either you can sit down and wait for things to happen, or you actively like try and do something about it. So
Yeah.
I actively tried and do something about it. And I always say, like, people come up to me and like, hey, what if I don't get approved? I'm like, dude, how do you know if you don't try? Like, I don't have a magic wand to get you approved.
Yeah,
But if you
I'm
don't try,
more
you're never gonna get
surprised.
approved.
Yeah, and I'm surprised as well that you, because I'm glad that you mentioned you were test automation engineer, because everyone
Yeah,
thinks that they have to work in
correct.
Apple and they have to
Yeah,
be this data scientist or machine learning engineers and all of
right.
that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
I'm glad that you
correct.
mentioned.
It's yeah. I just feel like you have to give it a shot, and you have to try for anything in life, not just about EB1A. If you don't try, it will not happen. And like the way I have lived my life on one basic principle is like, if you try, it will happen. Like you just keep trying and trying and trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, and trying, it will happen.
Yeah.
You have to work on it.
Thank you, Sahil, for this amazing masterclass. That's what it feels like. I know we're going to do probably more videos on O1 visas and other visas as well. So I can't wait to bring you back. But until our next one.
Keep smiling, keep hustling.